Welcome to Line Upon Line, where we go through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are in the book of Revelation today, so get your Bible, find a comfortable chair, and let us look at this wonderful text together. Welcome back to Line Upon Line. I hope you're following along with us, reading ahead, becoming familiar with the text, so that when we get together, we can look at this wonderful text. Chapter 17 is probably, to me at least, is the central chapter. This is where major stuff happens, and it's also a difficult chapter, so you're going to have to turn your brain up to 10 as we move into this text. This is the judgment of Babylon. Let me explain what Babylon is before we move into this. Babylon is obviously a city in Iraq. Now, is it talking about that city? It could be. But I believe it's talking about something much greater than Babylon the city. It's talking about Babylon the system, a system that was put into place right after the flood, when Nimrod, the great-grandson of Noah, came on the scene. And God had told the people to spread out over the whole earth. And Nimrod said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to build a city. And they built a tower, the Tower of Babel. And they did that in rebellion against God and began something that still exists in the world today. And what is that? It's the Babylonian system. It's a sinister system. There are three parts to it. There is an economic system. There is a religious system, and there is a political system. So when it talks about Babylon, it's talking about much more, I believe, than the city of Babylon. You know, when you look at, for instance, Washington today, Babylon has its effects in Washington. When we look at Los Angeles and Hollywood, Babylon, we see the effects of Babylon in our rebellion, in our movies and in the media and so forth. I mean, if you watch any amount of television, you'll notice quickly that there's a lot of violence, a lot of sexual promiscuity, a lot of rebellion. So I think Babylon, first of all, is not only the city in Iraq. I think it's a system, a world system. So let's begin this difficult chapter. Now, first of all, Babylon had already fallen in chapter 14, verse 8. And here we are going to back up in chapter 17 and see some of the details. That's what I believe what is happening here. It says in verse 1 of chapter 17, and I'll read the first two verses, "Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, 'Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication.'" So there's an addictive quality here to Babylon. There's an addictive quality to the economic Babylon. Everybody wants as much money as they can get, and which is not right, because, Paul tells us that we should be content with what we have. I am so content with where I am, and my wife and my family. I mean, we have enough to eat, we have a home, and I have a shower and a bed, and I'm so grateful for that. Well, there's something addictive about the economic Babylon that we see even in our churches today with movements like the prosperity movement. I don't believe that's godly. I believe Colossians 3:2 says, "Set your mind on things above, not on things of this earth." We are not to be economic, money-oriented. We are to be God-oriented. So it says in verse 1, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, 'Come, I will show you.'" Now he is going to take John to a vantage point where he can see what he wants John to see. "I will show you the judgment of the great harlot." Now the word harlot there is porne. And of course we get the word pornography from it. And pornography is very seductive. Political power is very seductive. Economic money is very seductive. He's going to show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. Now, in verse 15 of chapter 17, it speaks, we'll get there in a few minutes. The waters are identified there for us as nations, peoples, and tongues. So waters here, who sits on many waters, is not to be taken literally. This is to be taken in context of verse 15. So let me show you, he says, the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So again, this addictive quality of the harlot, Babylon, who has a political side to it, it has an economic side to it, and it has a religious side to it. Verse 3. "So he," the angel of verse 1, "carried me away in the Spirit." Now that tells us that we are going to see this whole scenario from God's perspective. "He carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." Now, if you just read that without explanation, your head is going to sort of spin. But let's break this down so that we can understand. If we can understand 3 and 4, the rest of the chapter is going to be easy to understand. "He carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman." Now this woman is the harlot of verse 1. And this is a rebellious religious system, and she was sitting on, that is, distinct from, and when a person sits on a beast, the person is in charge of the beast. And that is the case here. The religious system, for the moment, is in charge of the political system. You see, the beast is Babylon, the political system, and the woman who is riding on it is the religious system. Now let's do it again. "I saw a woman sitting on, distinct from, but supported by, a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads." Now, what are the heads? Well, these are those successive kingdoms that we went through a couple of chapters ago. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Having 7 heads, 7 successive kingdoms empowered by Satan, and 10 horns. Now, just stay with me, this is important, 10 horns. Now these would be equal to the 10 toes of Daniel chapter 2. Remember the statue that was built in Daniel chapter 2? It had a head of gold, it had a chest of silver, a belly of bronze, the legs were iron, and the feet were a mixture of clay and iron, and a stone, of course, struck the feet, and the whole statue came down. Now, the stone, of course, is Jesus. But the 10 toes are equal here to the 10 horns. So you see what's happening. It says, I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads, 7 successive kingdoms, and 10 horns. Now this speaks of the end time Babylon that will rise up out of the sea. Now what's this going to be? Is it going to be the United Nations? Is it going to be the Economic European Community? We don't know, because it hasn't happened yet. Can we conjecture about it? Of course. But we don't know. I don't know. But these 10 horns speak of a future 10-nation confederacy. Now, verse 4. The woman, this is the false religious system, was arrayed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In other words, the woman is just encased in a luxury environment, and much of the religious system today is encased in luxury. I mean, you go to certain churches in multi-million-dollar buildings, and so many applications of this. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, and there's something intoxicating about this false religious system, having in her hand a golden cup. For what purpose? To offer it to all. Here, drink of this. Full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So this woman, this religious system, is a glamorous system, but it's a prostitute, it's a harlot. Verse 5, and on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. In contrast to that, the high priest back in the book of Exodus had a crown on his head, and what was written on the crown? Holiness unto the Lord. And it's just the opposite. This religious system that will one day come to an end has written on its forehead, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. But the angel said to me, why did you marvel? There's a rebuke here. I will tell you the mystery of the woman, the religious system, and of the beast, the political system that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. Now here's where your brain has to go up to 10. Here it is, verse 8. I'm going to read just verse 8. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. All those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now let's look at that closely. Verse 8. The beast, this is the beast, the scarlet beast, the false political system, that you saw was. The false political system in John's day was embodied in Rome. So the beast that you saw was in Rome and is not. Remember, John is taken in the Spirit to a place beyond his time. So when it says, and is, and it says, and is, well, it currently is. Let's start again. Verse 8. I really want you to understand this. The beast that you saw was false political system that was in John's day, and is. It currently is because John is in the Spirit. And is not. Speaking of in the future, in John's future, Rome fizzled out and will ascend out of the bottomless pit. Speaking of a reemergence of the Roman Empire in the form of the economic European community, and go to perdition, means go to utter destruction. Those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of from the world. Why will they marvel? Because this ancient civilization will rise from the dead. When they see the beast that was and is not, Rome was, is not, it goes away, and yet is. It comes back. Let me just read the verse again. Please understand this. The beast that you saw was, and is not, will ascend out of the bottomless pit. This Roman Babylonian Empire will come back and go to perdition. It will be utterly destroyed. And those who dwell on the earth, and that is very important, those who dwell. The word there means to dwell, means to house permanently. Listen, if this world is your home, if this is all there is for you, I really feel sad for you. You know, for the Christian, the world is as bad as it gets, because we have something to look forward to. We have heaven to look forward to. For the non-Christian, the world is as good as it gets. Get everything that you can because this is all there is. Not true. There is eternal life with Christ. And when it says those who dwell on the earth will marvel, because this is all there is. Whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was in John's day, is not, goes away, and yet is. It comes back. Verse 9. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 beasts are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Now, I don't believe that these are the 7 hills of Rome, because I think Babylonian system is way bigger than Rome. I think the Babylonian system is a global situation. So I do not believe these 7 mountains are the 7 hills of Rome, but I believe they are, again, those 7 successive governments that started in Egypt and ends with the end time European economic community. So here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Verse 10. There are also 7 kings, and they are political heads of these 7 successive governments. 5 have fallen. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece, all religious strongholds in their day. And 1 is, that would be Rome, and the other has not yet come, that is, in John's time. Now it will come probably in our time. And when he comes, and that he is difficult to identify, because I believe this he is the Antichrist. And the Antichrist would be difficult to identify at this point in time. And he, when he comes, he must continue a short time, a 7-year period. Verse 11, the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, speaking of the ultimate future Antichrist, and is of the seven, that is, sharing the same characteristics with the previous seven, and is going to perdition. And we know the Antichrist will spend his eternity in hell. Verse 12, the 10 horns, which you saw, are 10 kings, and again this would correspond to the 10 toes of Daniel, who receive no kingdom as yet, but they, the 10 kings, receive authority for 1 hour, which is a very short period of time, as kings with the beast. Now, let me tie this all together by saying one thing. If you go on the internet, for instance, and see the back of a euro dollar, what is on the back of a euro dollar? A picture of a woman riding a beast. This is what connects the current situation with what we see in Revelation. And it identifies it as something happening in Europe, the revived Roman Empire, the economic European community. It could be, it could involve the United Nations. It could involve a variety of things. But for the time being, verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. But they receive authority for 1 hour, a very short period of time, as kings with the beast. So these 10 kings and the Antichrist are going to form an alliance at some point in time. And as we look at Europe today, we can see this alliance coming together. Verse 13. These 10 kings of verse 12 are of one mind, and they will give their power, the European Economic Community, and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Normally we say when it says waters, it means waters. But in this case, the waters are identified for us as peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Verse 16. The 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, that's the religious system of verse 1, who is riding the beast, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So that's simply saying this: the political system uses the religious system to get what it wants, and then, of course, it destroys it. Now, we see that today in politicians. Politicians will use the religious system to get what they want. And then when they get what they want, they discard it. Many times you'll hear politicians say that there are Christians. For what purpose? To get our support. But that has to be discerned. So here, the religious system rides the political system until it gets what it wants, and then it destroys the religious system. Verse 17, for God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is that great city. I don't think this is Rome or Babylon. I think it's too big. I think this is a global situation. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, in John's day, of course, Rome would personify what is Babylon. Today, New York personifies what is Babylon. Hollywood, Los Angeles, Washington personify today what is Babylon. So you see, it seems to me that Babylon is way more than Babylon the city. Babylon is a global thing. Let's begin chapter 18. We won't get very far, but it speaks of the economic system that will be destroyed. After these things, after what things? After the destruction of spiritual Babylon in chapter 17, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority. This is awesome. And the earth was illuminated with his glory, the awesome power of a single angel. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. So we're going to have to stop there today. But please understand this. There are three aspects to this Babylon. The first is an economic Babylon. The second is a religious Babylon. And the third is a political Babylon. And what we just saw destroyed in chapter 17 was religious Babylon. That was the harlot that rode the beast. Now, next week when we get together, we will look at chapter 18. I encourage you to read ahead and become familiar with the text. Look, God bless you good. Thank you for watching Line Upon Line. I hope that it was of benefit to you and would encourage you to make the Bible a regular part of your day. The purpose of this ministry is to point you to Jesus and make him the object of your worship. If you are attending a church at the present time, I would encourage you to stay where you are. Support the body. Pray for your pastor. If you haven't been attending a church, I invite you to visit Calvary Chapel of Lancaster on Sunday mornings at 10:15, Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock for a verse-by-verse study. We meet at the Mennonite Information Center on the corner of Route 30 and Millstream Road. We are on the web, www.calvarychapel.org/Lancaster. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. God bless.